Hello?
Hello?
This is Katita. I left a message.
She's on.
Okay.
Okay, great.
Great.
Well, maybe it's beautiful wherever all of those other 110 people who signed up and are not on this webinar where they live, so that maybe they're outside instead. But in the interest of time, we're going to start this webinar now. Welcome to all of you who have signed on, and thank you so much for joining us today. I'm Sue Osthoff, and I'm with the National Clearinghouse for the Defense of Battered Women, and we're here in Philadelphia, and I'll be your host for today's webinar. And before we begin, we'll go over some logistics for today. There's a lot of technological stuff that everybody needs to be aware of, and I know if you've done webinars before, you've heard this a million times, so please bear with us. If you're disconnected from the webinar at any time, just go back to that original email and click on the link that's in there to log back in. And if you continue to have problems getting back on, call iLink support at 800-799-4510. Emily, if you could put that in the chat box, please. Okay, great. Thank you, Emily. You'll find the chat box down in your lower left-hand corner of your screen. And to use it, you go to the bottom box in the bottom rectangle there. Put your cursor in there, click, and then type a message, and then hit the Enter key to submit it. So why don't we go ahead and try the chat. And if you could all tell us where your name will come up if you signed in with your email, so you don't need to tell us that. Tell us where you're calling in from today, and if there's more than one of you at your site, if you could tell us how many, that would be great. How many of you are there? So try. Thanks. Great. Great. Thank you all for letting us know where you're from. I see people are calling in from around the country. And if there's more than one of you there, if you can let us know, that's really helpful. It gives us a better idea. Great. As most of you know, all the participants are muted. And so what we'll do is we'll collect questions during the webinar down in that public chat box. So if you have any problems or questions, you can put them down in that box there. And during the webinar, I'll collect the questions, and if we have enough time, we'll get to all your questions at the end, or we'll get to as many as we can at the end of the webinar. We'll leave about 15 minutes for that. So feel free to post your questions down in that corner there. If you have any technical problems, you can go to the private chat and send me a message. My name is Sue Osthoff, O-S-T-H-O-F-F. And if you happen to be on the audio portion only, it means you didn't sign in to iLink and you're not seeing this webinar at the chat box, you can send messages to me, questions to me at sueo, S-U-E-O, at ncdbw.org. And those are the initials of our organization, National Clearinghouse Defense BatteredWomen.org. And I'll do the best I can to get back to you, okay? We are recording this webinar today, and you'll be able to access it on our website in hopefully about 7 or 10 days. And our website is www.ncdbw.org. To go to get this webinar or past webinars, you go to the Resource tab, and that will bring you to the recordings of the webinars. I'll also send you an email shortly after the webinar is over, and it will contain confirmation of your attendance and a link to our posted recordings and a brief survey. And it would be really helpful if you take really 2 minutes to fill out the survey. Any feedback you can give us can help make the next ones better. Now we're going to find out a little bit more about who you are. Hopefully. We've been having some technological glitches here. There. On your screen, for those of you who are signed in, you'll see 3 questions. What we'd like you to do is actually answer the questions directly on the screen. So it says, how do you describe your profession? If you're a community-based advocate, just click that little dot to the left of the answer. Only those of you who are answering other, if you could answer other and then go to the chat box and let us know what other profession you are, that would be great. And the same with, are you an OVW grantee, yes or no? If you'll click those little dots there, that would be helpful. And the same at the bottom with if you are an OVW grantee, if you can click right on the screen and let us know. If your answer is other, if you can then also go over to the chat box and put in your answer, that would be incredibly helpful. So we'll give just another little minute or two here for answers. So if you can fill out your answers directly there on the screen, that would be terrific. Just so everybody can see the answers here. There's the answers to the questions. So you see that there's a lot of community-based advocates and also a lot of researchers and a lot of other. So thank you for doing that. It's very helpful information to us. And then you can see also the OVW grantees. Presenters, you can see those answers too, so you have a sense of who's on this call?
Yes.
Okay, terrific.
Yes.
Great. Thank you so much. All right. For those of you who just joined us, I'm Sue Osthoff with the National Clearinghouse for the Defense of Battered Women, and I really want to extend a warm welcome to all of you for joining, and thank you for joining us. This is the fourth in our series of webinars about when survivors reenter their communities after jail or prison. And as I said, if you missed the other webinars in this series, the recordings of the first three are posted on our website at ncdbw.org. Emily, if you'll type that in, that would be helpful. And you can go and listen to the recordings. And when you go to listen to the recordings, what happens is you have to sign back into iLink, and it will pull up the PowerPoint, and the recording will go. So you'll have access to both. Okay? And you go to our website and then go to the Resources tab. Before we go any further, I want to thank the Office on Violence Against Women for the support of this project on reentry. We just think it's so great that they're supporting work with survivors who are reentering. It's such an important subject and as important issue. I also want to thank our colleagues at the Better Women's Justice Project for the continued and truly excellent help and support with our webinars, so thank you. Again, all participants are muted, so as I mentioned earlier, we will collect questions during the presentation, and time allowing, we will ask as many as we can to the presenters at the end of their presentation. So feel free to ask your questions down in that little chat box. So as you're probably aware, today's webinar is called Formerly Incarcerated Women Talk About Reentry. And it really is a true honor and pleasure to get to introduce these three amazing presenters today. They are remarkable advocates now as they were during their time in prison. And on a personal note, I just want to say how lucky I feel to have these three women as my teachers. And they've really taught me so much over the years. And some of them I've known for many, many, many years. And I'm truly thrilled that they're willing to share their wisdom with all of us here today. And in an effort to save time, let's see here. I'll introduce them briefly, the presenters briefly. I know this PowerPoint slide, that the font is way too small, the size of the font is way too small. It's just they all have so much, they've done so much, and so we really wanted you to have a full sense of who they are. That information is also available for you to print out on our Google Docs site, and Emily, if you could put that up, that would be really helpful. But I'll try to do this briefly, and it was really hard to figure out what to say and what to leave out. So briefly, Brenda Klubine, and let me put her up there. This is Brenda, is a domestic violence survivor, and she served 26 years for defending herself against her abusive husband. She was released in 2008. While Brenda was in prison, she was the founder of Convicted Women Against Abuse, and that was the first abuse support group within the U.S. prison system. Her story is the subject of the documentary Sin by Silence, which I hope all of you have seen. And she is also the founder and executive director of Every 9 Seconds, an organization that advocates for incarcerated abuse victims. Brenda is often on the road speaking and conducting training, so we feel really lucky to find her at home today. Mary Heinen, who's in Michigan, is a longtime prisoner rights activist and reentry specialist. She went to prison in 1976 and was released in 2002 after serving almost 27 years. Within months after entering prison, she became an outspoken and extraordinarily fierce advocate for women and their families, as she continues to be today. She was the named plaintiff in a landmark case that has made a huge difference in the lives of incarcerated women in Michigan. She has started a number of programs, including a prison creative arts project, and has worked on reentry issues on local, state, and national levels. In 2011, Mary was selected as an Open Society Foundation Fellow and developed a reentry project with a focus on self-determination and self-efficacy of reentering people. While in prison, she earned a paralegal degree and 2 bachelor's degrees, and last year she received her MSW from the University of Michigan. And warm congratulations to you for that, Mary. And Antoinette Johnson is a formerly incarcerated survivor who has extensive knowledge of the issue of domestic violence and the incarceration of battered women because she has lived and overcome both. Antoinette served a little over 7 years in a prison in Kentucky. Currently, Antoinette works as a consultant to the Kentucky Domestic Violence Association, which is their state domestic violence coalition. In this capacity, she serves as a speaker on the formerly incarcerated Women's Speakers Bureau and as a group facilitator for the Kentucky Domestic Violence Association's Second Chance Coaches Project, what some people are calling a mentoring project for reentering women. Antoinette is currently pursuing a degree in criminal justice, and some of you may have heard her speak in one of our earlier webinars about that project. And last, and I would say certainly not least, I would like to introduce my coworker, Katita Cavero. She's a staff attorney here at the National Clearinghouse. And Katita is working on our reentry project here, and she organized today's webinar. And Katita will be the one who is really hosting the actual webinar itself. I know our presenters have tons to share with you, so I really want to turn it over to you. Just a reminder, if you're having trouble connecting, try calling iLink support at 800-799-4510. Emily, if you could put that back up. Other questions in the chat box, please. You could try calling us at 215-351-0010. So I really want to thank you all, Antoinette, Brenda, and Mary, for your amazing work and your great thinking. And thank you for your willingness to share it with all of us today and to share with us some about your personal experiences. It's really brave of you. And I do think of you as brave and amazing women. And as I have said earlier, you have taught me so much, and you've taught so many of us so much. So we really want to thank you for joining us today. And finally, without further ado, I will turn the mic over to Katita.
Thank you, Sue. As Sue said, each of our 3 panelists has such a wealth of experience with women's reentry, and I truly feel so fortunate to be able to facilitate this conversation today. Before getting to our panelists, I would like to take a moment to explain how we structured today's webinar. So I'll be posing 6 questions, and each panelist will have a chance to respond. Our goal is to reserve at least 15 minutes at the end for your questions. So remember, if you have a question for the panelists, please type it in the public chat. Sue will be collecting the questions, as she said, and we'll get to as many of them as we can. So let's begin. Welcome, Brenda, Mary, and Antoinette.
Hi.
Hi. Again, hi. Again, thank you so much for being here and sharing your experiences with reentering after incarceration, and as well as your knowledge from doing great advocacy work in reentry work with other survivors. So I just want to get right to the questions here. The first question asks about your own experiences. What was particularly helpful as you returned back to the community? And was there anything that was particularly unhelpful as you returned? And before answering, could each of you give the audience a little more context about your incarceration? Things like, how long you were inside, how long ago did you return, and anything that you think would be helpful for our listeners to know as we move forward in the conversation. And Brenda, I would ask, can you start us off?
Sure.
Great.
Hi, this is Brenda, and it's such an honor and pleasure to be part of this today. I was incarcerated for 6 years. I went through quite an abusive situation beforehand with my husband, and I was very broken by the time I got there, and I couldn't understand why not only was I having issues with the justice system prior, but how I could end up serving a life sentence for having to protect my life. It really helped shape who I am today and why I continue to work with incarcerated domestic violence survivors. There are so many women incarcerated nationwide at this time. I was the founder of Convicted Women Against Abuse, and it was the first inmate-initiated and inmate-led support group for abused women in the nation and within the prison system. This afforded me the opportunity to connect with our legislature in the state of California and to get them to come and hold a public hearing, and therefore we moved forward. The Battered Women Syndrome became law because of that hearing so that other women would not have to experience the same experiences we did without having a justifiable defense. From there, I have been released. It'll be this October, 5 years. It is quite a journey, to say the least. There have been many very overwhelming moments for me being out. It wasn't a situation for me. I didn't have a lot of the usual things that a lot of people have. My biggest thing was that I recognized that I had changed and my feelings and perceptions had changed, and it wasn't so much that other people who had been in my life prior were still kind of in the same place in their lives. So that in some ways became very overwhelming for me. It was also very important that people not hover over me because people were trying to take care of everything and tell me what to do, and I was kind of beginning to feel like I was almost still incarcerated, and I needed to be able to set my own boundaries and make my own decisions and feel good about those accomplishments as I did each one of them. So that was very important to me. And things that maybe were not so helpful was that I had to do so many of the things that we all take for granted and get my Social Security card, get a driver's license, go through many of these experiences and didn't have people to kind of help lead me and guide me to do that so that I wasn't so lost, if you will, for a lack of a better word to say. It's very important as survivors re-enter the community to have a mentoring team or people that will be there to support them and let them know that they're there to help them walk through the steps, because it's very difficult when family have passed away and friends no longer are there, because you're absolutely starting over. I was 20 years old when I went in, and I was 47 when I got out. So it was a huge change for me. Technology, everything changed. So it's very important that not only do we support survivors as they come into the community, but let them know what resources are available for them and let them know that there's some programs out there that can help them reintegrate.
Thank you, Brenda. Antoinette, would you share what you found was particularly helpful when you returned, and is there anything that was unhelpful? And again, if you can just briefly tell the audience anything that you would want to share about, how long you were inside and when you returned.
Hello, all. I'm Antoinette. I was incarcerated for 7 years, 3 months, and 2 days. One thing that I found helpful as I returned back to the community was being able to hear other women that were in similar situations as me as far as domestic violence-related charges, as far as just anyone who had been incarcerated for any charges and got out and were turning their life around. They were doing positive. They were giving back to the community. That was very helpful to me to listen to their experiences and struggles and hear their successes and barriers that they faced and overcame. It uplifted me and gave me great encouragement. It empowered me to want to do positive and to know that I could turn something that turned out negative for me into a positive. I didn't have to keep playing with the hand I was dealt. I could change that around for myself. So that was very encouraging for me and very helpful as I returned back to the community, and having a support system, someone I could talk to, someone that could be there when I had questions of things I may not have known, or small things like if you don't have a computer at home, being able to go to the library and use the computer. Some of the things that were unhelpful to me was when I first came out, a lot of my family wanted to take me to places, take me shopping, take me out to eat. And although I consider my term a short term, it was hard transitioning back. When you're in, it's like a different type of living than it would be out in society. So being around a lot of people all at once, going in Walmart and having so many people around and so many options of things to choose from, it was a little bit overwhelming. So I would say that was sort of unhelpful because I needed to go at that with baby steps. And that will be it.
Thank you, Antoinette.
You're welcome.
Mary, would you talk a little bit about what you thought was helpful as you returned and what was unhelpful? And again, if you can talk about how long you were inside, how long ago you returned for the listeners.
Yes. Hello, everybody. Thank you for inviting me. I went to prison right after the end of the Vietnam War. Christmas in 1975, the war had just ended. It's officially in April. That was the last time I was free and home. I did not return until after 9/11, and that length of time was devastating for me personally because it was decades behind bars. When I came home, the most helpful thing to me immediately was my mother. My mother, who was dying, opened her home to me and gave me a place to stay immediately where I was safe and where I could gather the pieces of my life and try to start over. And so housing was critically important. The support of a mentor was essential. As time went on, I had other mentors, people in the community, and and over time, of course, friends and other family. But immediately, having someone there that understood what was going on was very important. I needed to be triaged immediately because when you're released from prison, you're only given a small amount of medication, just basically to tide you over till you can get to a doctor. But when I got to a doctor, how do I explain where I've been almost 30 years? I have no medical records. I had no primary physician. So I ended up being taken by my mother to a chronic care, one of those emergency clinics, where we paid $77 to get a prescription for 1 month for my heart medication. That has really been a problem for me trying to get medical attention, even now, because even after all this time, you don't want to tell people that you've been in prison, but your doctor needs to know that. And I had a doctor that even refused to treat me. So housing, mentors, and medical care were essential.
Thank you, Mary. Let me go to the second question, which asks about short sentences versus long sentences. And Antoinette, I'll ask you to start. Are there differences in the needs that women have if they're returning after a short sentence versus after a long sentence?
I believe that there are. Myself personally, I consider myself a short sentence when compared to Mary and Brenda that are on the line with us. Like I said, I did 7 years, 3 months, and 2 days. For myself, there was a lot of things that I knew when coming out. I already knew about resume building. I knew about the type of clothing to wear on an interview. I knew how to use a computer. I knew about cell phones and things like that. So those were a lot of things that I already knew. They weren't new to me. This wasn't something that I had to learn. I already knew those things. A big thing for me would have been language barriers. I say that because when incarcerated, you take on a new language. I know a lot of people have flip-flops or pool shoes that they wear when they go in the summertime, when you wear them during the summertime. And we had a word that we called them, and we called those shower shoes. And I'll give you a story. I actually wore my shower shoes out of the institution. So that was one thing that I kept with me. When I got home and I was with my family, I realized that when I was going to get in the shower, I was wearing these shower shoes into the shower, at home, free, not incarcerated, not in jail, not locked up, able to come and go as I please. But I was going in the shower with these shoes on, and inside we wore those shoes because you have a lot of women all using the same showers. You don't want to get any kind of diseases, bacterial infections, so we would wear the shower shoes so our feet were not on the bare shower floor. So that was a big thing for me, having to transition out of just learned behaviors and learned patterns that I had while incarcerated. Other ingrained practices that I had that were difficult for me to shed or shift was I would carry around my toilet paper roll. I would go in the restroom and use it and come out, and 5 minutes later my mother would go in and she'd say, where's the toilet paper going? There's not even a roll in here. Mm-hmm. But when you're incarcerated, you have limited rolls of toilet paper, and you usually carry yours back and forth to the bathroom with you, and you take it back in your room, because if you only have 5 rolls in a month, you want to make sure that you don't leave it in there and someone else gets it. So that was a thing that was very odd to my family members, but to me it was like something that I had learned, that I had did for so long, it was hard to break that habit. I can also say that being able to talk to women and to help out in some of the projects that I'm in, or that I'm affiliated with, they really helped me to learn how to open up and talk to people. It taught me how to interact, because what do you do when you're gone for a short time to another person? But to me, 7 years wasn't a short time. I went to a church function, and I'm there, and a woman's telling me, didn't I see you at the fall festival? And I'm looking at her, and I'm like, no, ma'am. And she's like, I'm really sure you were here. I know that I just saw you not too long ago, And I'm thinking, what do you say? Do you turn around and tell the lady it couldn't have been me because I've been incarcerated for 7 years? You've never seen the lady before. How do you explain those things? And that would be the biggest difference for me as far as short sentencing.
And thank you, Antoinette. And Mary, do you see that there are differences in the needs of women that are returning after having served a short sentence versus having a long sentence?
Yes. For me, the most remarkable thing that happened to me was I experienced immediate PTSD, and I didn't realize that was going to happen. I had never seen that anywhere in writing about what happens to women when they return, when they've been locked up for decades. But I remember one particularly beautiful sunny day. I had only been out a couple of days, and I remember being at my sister's home, who was 18 months younger than me, but I had never been in her house before. Everybody was young when I was incarcerated. And so I remember stumbling through her backyard while they were having a party and just sobbing. It just poured out of me. All the grief, the stress, the relief, the agony over who I had left behind, the release of all those years of torture, and it just poured out of me. And I cried for weeks. I cried on the drop of a hat. And I've had several returnees men included, mention that to me. They think they're cracking up because they can't stop crying. But it's a symptom of the PTSD. It's a symptom of the relief that you finally have your life back. But what the hell are you going to do now? You survived, but, now what? So that was a big issue. Also, I as part of just being institutionalized for so long, of course there's a difference between institutionalization and PTSD, but as part of the PTSD, I would see the faces of the people that I had been locked up with on other people. I'd be in some place like a grocery store, and I'd look and, oh my God, that's Mel, that's Molly, that's Joe, my guard. I would see Pete. I would see my brother driving in a truck. I would see there's a disorientation to time and place that happens as part of the natural physiological changes that you go through going from an institution to the street where everything moves and breathes, and it's not one plane of monotonous existence where people actually go stir crazy. Another thing that was really not understood by me at the time was the problems with sleep deprivation. When you live in an institution and your sleep patterns are completely disrupted, and everyone I know that I've talked to has had a problem with this, where your sleep is disrupted for long periods of time, and I actually still suffer from that. So in the process of learning how to navigate your life when you're a long-term incarcerated person, you have to reorient yourself to time and place and space, and that takes a while. I lost my internal compass. I'd get lost in the parking lot, I used to joke. But I couldn't. It took me a couple of years to even figure out how to navigate myself around, because when I returned home to my home like Flynn, it was beautiful when I was young, but when I came home, it looked like a bomb shelter after the war. It was a disaster. So for me, it was very difficult to navigate myself physically, emotionally, and actually be able to get around on the street, walking down it.
Thank you, Mary, for sharing that. That's really powerful. And Brenda, do you see that there is a difference in the needs of women if they have served a short time versus a long time?
Well, I think what Antoinette shared was so poignant, and same with Mary. And I think they are different because where Antoinette had said, she knew about things like cell phones and stuff. Well, in fact, the day that I got out on October 22nd, 2008, I was handed a cell phone to call my son and had no clue how to use it, didn't know how to dial it. And then when I was talking, I didn't realize that I didn't need to hold it in front of my mouth like a walkie-talkie, and that I could actually listen and speak at the same time. And although that may seem funny to some people, when you've never had that kind of technology, car phones were the size of shoe boxes when I went to prison. There were no quote-unquote cell phones. And it's difficult to navigate that process. And something that Mary brought up as well that is so profound, and that is how the area changed, where people had passed away that were maybe meant so much in your life, and now they were gone, and grieving the friends that you left behind, that is huge, because that's part of the reason why I still fight so hard for incarcerated survivors. I have not been able to just say, okay, I'm out, I'm free, and leave that behind and close that door. And as they all said, well, just forget about it, move forward. I cannot, so many of us cannot, and that's why we are doing the work that we're doing, because it's important that women in particular know, and men as well, but women in particular know that there are people and there are systems that are put in place and need to be put in place so that they have the support that they need. There were no programs that could help me do that. When I was released with an apology and good luck, no parole, no anything, and just thrown back. I had a pair of shower shoes, flip-flops, pants, and a zip-up hoodie, no money, no anything, and was 47 and had no clue what I was going to do. And without the 5 core people that were in my life, I would never have made it. Absolutely not, and wouldn't have been able to navigate in any way. And yes, I too cried, I think for the first year, every time I see a sunset or flowers or things that just were so amazing. I have a different sense of just wonder and amazement of things today than I had so many years ago.
Thank you, Brenda, for sharing that and your thoughts about, having returned after serving a long sentence and just as you said, really profound experiences in doing that. The next question, I'm going to ask Mary to start because, Mary, you've spoken about trauma already, but it asks about the experience of trauma. And what do you think advocates and other practitioners need to know about the trauma a woman may have experienced before incarceration, during incarceration, as she is returning, and after incarceration?
I think that it needs to be known that there's entire generations of women that did not have the benefit of a common current understanding of what domestic violence is and the legal protections with domestic violence supports and defenses in the law, in criminal law. And so there's my generation certainly, and the ones that are still alive before me from the 60s and 70s that never had a domestic violence defense at trial. So they're serving life for killing their abuser or similar circumstances, and they have never had a real trial or a real appeal and been able to present that evidence. So these are the women that are, and some men certainly, that are incarcerated decades and decades later that remain, that may be there till the day they die, that have not been able to be released because of that. I think that it's critical that we take a look at how to help those folks. Also, there's periods of trauma in a woman's life, and men, certainly I speak about men when I talk about this, where there's trauma that you've experienced as a child. It's the childhood assault or abuse, and then it's what led up to your case. So it's the abuse and whatever horror that you've had to endure before you were arrested. And then there's the period of time when you're incarcerated and you may be sexually assaulted and certainly fondled when they shake you down. I was sexually assaulted inside. Then there's the trauma and the PTSD after you're released, when you come home and, oh, my God, it's all these years later, and now you see the effects of trauma and of domestic violence over decades in your own family and the people around you and in the neighborhoods, and you hear story after story of what's happened to everybody that you have to relive and re-experience. So there's actually periods of time in a woman's life that's endured incarceration and is being released. The advocates need to understand that maybe they certainly can join in a sort of complicated grief and complicated trauma, so that when you screen women and when you're working with women returning, you need to figure that out. You need to figure out did they actually experience sexual assault? That's the number one question. Deal with was it before, was it during, was it after? Do they need treatment for PTSD? They need a complete PTSD screening, A to Z, to figure out how complicated these things are. And they can come in layers. They can come in waves of emotion and remembrance. One returnee that I worked with, that I helped triage, had childhood repressed memory until prison, and it came out then. And then when she came home, she had to deal with physically being in the places where that assault happened. And this woman is a great-grandmother now. So over the length of a woman's life, the effects of that, of generational trauma, of trauma in her own life, in her own experience, needs to be screened for, and it needs to be treated.
Thank you, Marian. I just wanted to follow up because earlier you had mentioned also institutional trauma. So I don't know if you could just elaborate a little bit more about that and the experience of trauma during incarceration.
During incarceration, trauma can be very severe because you are in a situation where often you see sexual assault and abuse happening around you, and you're not necessarily in a position to be able to report it. When we tried a case in Michigan and the Department of Justice came into the facility after years and years and years of trauma, my mouth hit the floor. I could not believe the women that were going to Control Center to go tell the stories of what had happened to them um, involving institutional trauma who were young, very young girls to women that could have been my grandmother. It's pervasive. It happens over and over and over and over. Sexual assault and abuse happens in prisons every day in the United States. And when you're dealing with that, and when you're living with it, and when you hear it in your sleep, and when you walk into a rec room and everybody has to be shook down, and you're standing there in your pajamas, and there's one male guard, and it's 11 o'clock at night, and nobody has contraband, you're watching TV in your pajamas, you realize the devastation of the molestation and the assault and the horrific things that happen against you as a human being and against the women that you're incarcerated with.
Thank you, Mary, for explaining that a little bit more clearly. And Antoinette, can you talk a little bit about what you see as the experiences of trauma before incarceration, during incarceration, and after incarceration?
Yes, I sure can. Before, I wanted to explain that what I think advocates and other practitioners need to know about the trauma a woman may have experienced is that she may not identify with DV, domestic violence. She may not view her situation as abuse, not reporting it. She may have never even told anyone about it. She could be in denial, or she could just simply not view her situation as she's being abused. She could see it as the father of her children. He's the head of household. He takes care of the finances. So when he withholds money, it's because he's the one that's out making the money. And that's just how it is, because that's what she was taught at church. The man is the head of household. It may be that she doesn't even understand the actual term domestic violence, or she doesn't view herself as a victim. During incarceration, is that some of the ladies still don't feel safe to disclose if they are even involved in domestic violence relationships or friendships, if they're involved in any abusive relationships. They may be going to classes that are domestic violence classes inside of the jails and prisons, and they may feel like, hey, even though I'm going through these classes, I can't be open about what's going on because you think that it's a woman's prison. They were in a relationship with the man before they were incarcerated, and there's no way that the things that were happening to them before they were incarcerated is happening now, because they're with women. Some women have relationships inside of the prison amongst each other, and some of them have friends that are manipulative, that are abusers in different types of ways. It could be financial, that they're leaning on someone for financial support because they don't have a lot while they're in there, or someone is using them to get what they have, and that those relationships are happening inside while incarcerated. And after incarceration, to look at that, the woman may be struggling with the fact that she's still going through this. Say you didn't know what it was before incarceration. Once you were incarcerated, you started going to DV groups and you figured out what it was, and you're starting to have these emotions about it. And then you think, okay, I'm overcoming this. I'm learning all of these lessons and what I can do if I'm in an abusive relationship, or I have finally understood what an unhealthy relationship is, and then you are released and you get out and you find yourself in the same relationship or the same situation. That can be very hard on a person, because some people feel like once they've learned a new lesson and they've been taught it, when you get out from prison and you're out and you go through the same situation, or you're back in an abusive relationship, you beat yourself up because you feel like, I should know better. I've been here. I've learned about this. I know what unhealthy relationships look like. I've learned about red flags in my domestic violence class while I was incarcerated. So how am I out here now in society and I still can't get past what all I've been through in my past, or I'm going through the same type of relationship? A lot of women will not speak about it. At first, it takes a long time because they have to build up a relationship with you. They have to trust you to be able to tell you what has happened. So they just may be holding that in. They may have never even talked about it yet. And that would be the only thing that I can add to it.
Thank you, Antoinette. And Brenda, what do you think would be helpful for advocates and other practitioners to know about trauma that women have experienced before, during, as she's returning, and after incarceration?
Hi again. I think a huge part of before, as Antoinette and Mary both touched on, is that a lot of women don't understand or know that they were in an abusive situation. And I mean, you can go into a room today and ask someone, if someone's being called out of their name and disrespected, is that abuse? And most people won't raise their hands because they don't understand that it is abuse. So what happens is that, you know, when you don't know and understand what the red flags are, what your situation is, I mean, you know it hurts. You know, and so often you're so happy, you can't get out of it. Then you're put into a situation in the justice system that doesn't get it, doesn't have any clue on how to deal with, you know, someone that has been through an abused situation, and then you're thrown into a place where lots of women are. Some of them are predators themselves, and couple in with the fact that at least 80% of incarcerated women have been abused at some point in time in their life, and then are in this situation and having to live in it 24 hours a day, and if their roommate is beating up on another roommate or they are beaten up, it's not like you can go up to the officer and say, oh, yeah, this is what's going on. There are a lot of homosexual relationships that take place. There's a family situation that starts, and you call women mom or your sister, and it's like a surrogate family, if you will, just in order to survive. And it all becomes almost overwhelming in a sense that that's the only way that you know your survival can happen. When she's returning, I knew for the last couple of months prior to my release that things were coming in for me and that my case would be overturned. And the trauma of that in itself was very overwhelming. I couldn't talk to anybody about it because I was afraid to tell one of my peers, because if I told them because of jealousy that happens, and I was afraid that something would screw it up and I wouldn't get out to court and I wouldn't be released. And there were so many fears that came up, and what was I going to do? And because for so long we put in our minds, you know, what we want to do and where we want to go and the things that we saw for our lives. But when we get out and are preparing to get out, there's a whole new set of fears that take over. Now, after incarceration, you know, I think it's very important that advocates and practitioners understand that if a woman doesn't understand that she is a PTSD survivor, she certainly is. And that is very clear and evident, and anybody that's been incarcerated, I don't male or female, we all experience it, and we all need to get some form of counseling, and we need to be screened for it so that we understand, so that we each individually can understand. That's why how advocates and practitioners deal with men or women that have been incarcerated, and I don't care if it's a short term or a long term, there is going to be PTSD, and these things have to be able to be walked through with the person that they're dealing with, because they are individuals, and we've all been treated for so long as nothing more than a number, and so that's very, very important.
Thank you, Brenda. Let's go to our next question, which asks about adult history of abuse. What do you think is unique to returning women who have experienced adult abuse? And Mary, can I ask you to start?
Yes, I think what is unique, shall we say, of returning women who have experienced adult abuse is that we can help and inform each other. I think it's trauma-informed curriculum like Seeking Safety, which we used in a women's support group for about 18 months here in the Detroit area, was very helpful because we actually had permission to be together. One of the most harmful rules is that you cannot have contact with anyone that has had a felony or had a record. And for those of us that have been locked up, that's everybody you know just about. So when you leave, you lose your support system completely, and you have to start over. And when you can't talk to somebody that has the same frame of reference, that has the same culture, that's experienced what you have experienced, it can be devastating, and you end up doing things like I did, which is calling a former lifer in the middle of the night when my mother is dying just to have somebody to talk to. So peer support is critical. I think that trauma treatment and services and similar support groups and screening is essential. And I think that it's very important that adult history of abuse with women in particular be understood throughout the entire life of the individual and not just what has happened to them recently.
Thanks, Mary. Antoinette, can you share your thoughts about what is unique to returning women who have experienced adult abuse?
For me, what's unique would be just how that person transitions with connecting with others. It is very hard to let down your guard and have trust with anyone, including family members that you've been away from, people that you've known all your life, but you've been gone for 7 years. So technically, you know them before, but you don't know them now. Just being able to reconnect and having to learn everyone all over again. The one thing that I can say that I think is unique is that you always know that the person that has been released is their intentions are true. There is no hidden agenda. We are hungry for information. We're hungry to find things out, to learn different things. So you know that it's genuine. And then for people on the outside, understanding that we're experiencing an inner struggle that we can't put into words. You hear people say that you should be happy you're out, you're free, you're not still incarcerated. And in no way, shape, form, or fashion am I trying to downplay that I'm happy that I am released, but I'm trying to learn how to deal with things that I didn't deal with before I was incarcerated, that I wasn't able to deal with while I was incarcerated, and learn how to transition back. It can be very hard to do. Having PTSD and being diagnosed with it is one thing, but getting treated for it is something completely different. Although it's great to be out, there's still underlying issues that a person may have. And that would be.
Thanks, Antoinette.
You're welcome.
And Brenda, what do you think is unique to returning women who have experienced adult abuse?
Again, I think women in particular who are survivors, when it's been a long time and they've experienced abuse, they're going to, most and if not all, are going to continue to have experiences around their trauma and history of abuse. And because they've never talked about the abuse before, it kind of really does damage. It does some damage. And when you're a survivor, even if it's been a long time, the problem is that we need counseling. Counseling is so important. And, a lot of times women are forced to return back to their community where their victim family members may still live. There are huge safety issues then come into play, and there's fears. There's a whole new set of fears because most inmates have to, when they're released, have to return back to their community of commitment. Well, when that happens, what are these women supposed to do? And so they need to have a safety net. If it's going to be important that they need to not go back to that county because of the judgment of the families or how the families have treated them at parole hearings or any of those things, it's very imperative that these women be allowed to change their county that they are returning to so that they can feel safe. They haven't felt safe for so many years. Before incarceration and after, that's why that is so key and vital. That's just huge, huge. And it's, because of the adult abuse, there's a lot of other abuses that can happen. once you're out. You can get involved with someone that without even realizing it is out to do nothing more than to use you and again abuse you, and you don't know, and again you're trapped in another situation. It's so important that advocates and practitioners that deal with people that are returning to the community be able to know and point out these factors and let women and men know both that they have a method and a plan to help them navigate these things that are ahead of them, to make it, to make the reintegration so much easier for them.
Thank you, Brenda. Our next question talks about interventions, specifically helpful interventions. Are there interventions or services that are particularly helpful to address traumas for returning citizens? And Mary, because you've talked about a few of them, will you start this question, answering this question?
Yes. I think one of the keys to this and to understanding interventions of services for returnees are the understanding that prison culture is based on oral tradition, that when you're locked in a cage with thousands and thousands of similarly situated women and men, all you have is each other. So you sit and you talk to each other, and you talk and you talk. You tell each other story after story after story, and there's no technology or other world devices to draw your attention away. So that prison becomes a place where you speak and you share and you inform each other, and that is your method of communication. So when you enter into a technological age, you're a dinosaur. You're somebody that's coming back from this rich oral tradition into things where a situation where everything moves very, very fast. So I think it's critical for people working with returnees to understand that returnees will talk your ear off. They will talk and talk and talk and talk because that is how they are oriented, and that if you just be still and listen, they will tell you exactly what they need because they've had a lot of time to figure it out and they know what they need. One of the most exciting developments for me in my world has been the Affordable Care Act, which was signed into law on March 23rd of 2010. And out of that has come a new program at St. Luke's Roosevelt Hospital in New York, the Center for Comprehensive Care, called Coming Home. And with Affordable Act money and with other support, Coming Home is a program that's run out of the hospital, and I understand there's a couple more clinics now, that provides a welcoming environment for people coming home from correctional settings, that offers counseling and case management services to formerly incarcerated people. And so the Center for Comprehensive Care provides primary health care and medical care, OB/GYN, women's health treatment, mental health treatment, dental care, case management and social services, legal services, support groups, and they even have yoga. This is a program, www.centerforcare.org, that I hope will expand as as that situation develops with the funding in the communities. Also, I think that peer support should be understood as absolutely a critical piece to this, because I don't think there can be interventions for services unless you listen to directly affected people. In The New Jim Crow from Michelle Alexander, she makes a couple of very astute observations, and one is we need to break the silence about what's happening with mass incarceration and with domestic violence and with situations that we're talking about right now, and that, two, nothing can happen until the voices of incarcerated and formerly incarcerated people are heard and understood and listened to and acted on. I mean, there's a real key to this, which is the richness of the experience that millions of us have had that we can share and help contribute to the answers to this. And I think it's critical that events happen like this, where you could actually hear somebody that has gone through this, that has survived, that can bring voice and give voice to the inmate nation that's locked up, that has been incarcerated for decades and decades and decades and can't speak for themselves.
Thank you, Mary. Antoinette, can you talk about services or interventions that are particularly helpful to address the traumas for reentering citizens?
Yes, I can. Some of the interventions or services I actually would like to talk about. Just knowing the local DV programs will will work with returning survivors. Knowing that they will work with that community. Knowing what the local resources are that address trauma. Starting reentry work with the ladies while still incarcerated, or while still inside. Having women come from outside to talk to the women that are inside to share their experiences and give insight. I spoke about that a little bit. Especially if also experiencing trauma themselves and how to go about how to have more success once they're released. It's very helpful to connect with other community organizations to build relationships and collaborate to go into the jails besides anti-DV organizations. I know that there was a church that I had linked up with, and they would go into the jails and they would teach a class once a week in the jails. They would go in. It was a religious group, and one of the ladies in the group was she was a substance abuser in the past, but she had I think it was like almost 30 years clean. So just to see someone, like I said, that has been in your shoes, like there's people in there that may have went through certain things, that have been in your shoes, and to see them come out on a positive note, to have those people come in and mentor to you while inside and build those relationships up was really, 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 really helpful, and I think that's really a good thing for reentering citizens. And let's see, it's helpful to work through the process. For me, was the involvement with the KDVA, the Kentucky Domestic Violence Association. They set up for the group that was released when I was released. It was 6 of us, and then I think it was like 19 or so women that were released before us. They had a yearly retreat. Every year they had a retreat. We would go somewhere. One time we went to Baghdad, Kentucky, and we were in a log cabin, and it was catered, so food was there. We had a licensed therapist that came. She did activities with us. We spoke. We had song night. We did certain activities that helped us, be able to talk about what we were going through. We got to share our stories, share what we all had been through. So just being able to reconnect with those ladies that we considered friends, or those ladies that were incarcerated with me, and just to be able to share, our worries, our fears, our accomplishments, obstacles and things that we had been through, to be able to share those things. And one person had told me that they got their rights back to vote. I thought that the whole time I was incarcerated, when I heard about this, I thought that once I was incarcerated, I lost that. I couldn't get those back. So to learn that I could, and to learn how to go about doing it was just amazing, to learn something that I would have never known to ask, because I actually thought that I didn't have them anymore. So finding out about those things was pretty cool to me. Let's see. Just coming back into your life after you've left it, and just not knowing what else is there. A lot of services that were helpful to me was being able to go to the Center for Women and Families and do one-on-one counseling or group counseling, being able to get in classes that helped me learn about balancing a checkbook, learning about my credit score. Those type of things were very helpful. I can also say another thing that was very helpful was just having someone to talk to, whether it be a counselor, a friend, just someone you could actually just bear it all with, tell your innermost, darkest secrets, because you don't have someone to talk to.
Thank you, Antoinette. And Brenda, the same question. Are there any helpful interventions or services that you think are particularly helpful to address traumas for reentering citizens?
In California, we don't have as many. However, there are some, especially for women, that maybe it's been a long time since they've been in their specific abusive relationship, and yet there are some programs where that offer specialized trauma counseling for DV survivors because so many of them are geared to just the current abusive situation, and so that kind of leaves them out because there's so many issues that are still surrounding all of that trauma that need to be dealt with because in most cases they still have not had the opportunity and the chance to deal with those issues. There are some peer support groups that can be very helpful when family and friends are no longer there. Or if they are, they don't get it. It's difficult for them to understand you being away so long and as Antoinette said, that you're not really excited about, every little thing and that you just need to be happy that you're free. That's great, and we are, but those same feelings also are compounded with the fact that, you know what, we're here and we are happy, but how do you deal with that? Where do you go from there? How do you move forward? And when you have a support group that offers that avenue in order to help that journey move forward and you to be able to move forward, that is huge. And it's very important that practitioners and advocates offer a method for that to happen. Not all support groups or all organizations offer these things. So it makes it really difficult when those things are not available for you.
Thank you, Brenda. And this is our final question. And I think that all of you have spoken about some of these strategies, but what do you really think helps with the transition back, and what do you see creates additional barriers or risks for those survivors who are returning? And again, I know that you've all spoken about some of these in very powerful ways. I just want to give this opportunity to really just talk about any other things that you haven't spoken about. And Mary, could you start us off?
Yes. For me, what was the most helpful immediately was I was able to find a job. I found a job working in the grocery store, and the man that hired me was pulling his hair out because he had just fired somebody. It was almost the time to set up for the holidays, and he didn't have help. So I walked up to him, and I said, because I heard him, and I said, if you hire me, I live right across the street. I'll come anytime you call me. I'll be the best worker you ever had. I need a job. I'm living with my parents, and I don't have any money, and I'm starting over. I'm after a divorce. And I did not tell him I had been a prisoner, although I did check, yes, I had had a felony on the box. And I later found out they actually got a $7,000 tax break for it. So I was able to work out a lot of what my experience was because I had been used to working for years and years. I had a good work ethic, and, that was very powerful for me to be able just to get back into the flow of life and to be around in a grocery store with the smells of bread and flowers and hear all the multiple languages and see how diverse society is now and just be able to re-enter at my own pace with employment. What is very difficult for most of us is the extreme family complexity that we come back into and the poverty transition. We have no income. We have no assets. I don't have 30 years of Social Security in the bank. I have no assets. I have nothing in my bank account right now. We are poor people. We're people that can't possibly survive unless we have employment or housing, and so anything that helps that is a tremendous asset to us. And to me, the current challenge for policy and for practitioners is to be able to support returnees with a way and a plan to be able to work through how to get a job, how to find housing, and how to maintain yourself for the rest of your life.
Thank you, Mary. And Antoinette, can you talk about what you think is helpful with the transition back and what creates additional barriers or risks?
Yes. What I think I'm going to stress helps with transition back is support systems. And when I say that, I don't necessarily mean anything that has to do with financial. I mean support systems just to encourage, to empower, just to lift these women up and to give them that extra push or to give them a cheerleader on the side saying, hey, you can do this. You can do these things. What was very helpful for me was my involvement with the KDVA, just being able to put my story out there, put my voice out there, be heard, to help other people like me people who don't know that they're like me yet. They haven't got to that part that they realize that they're in an unhealthy relationship, to basically make people aware. It helped me to help others because it helped me heal within myself. Let's see. What creates additional barriers or risks? One of the things for me was medical care, just not knowing how to go about that. I didn't have insurance. I didn't have, the resources to know what all I needed to do. I did find out during one of those retreats that I could get free dental care done at one of the hospitals here in Louisville, Kentucky. I know it was either Mary or Brenda who talked about employment, not really knowing who's hiring convicted felons. How do you advance on the job once you actually get it? Can you move up? Do you have to stay in the same place? Can you go into management? How to overcome coworkers' attitudes about you being a convicted felon and you're working side by side with them. Let's see, housing was a big thing. Housing was a big thing. You don't have a lot of options. Usually if you have certain types of charges, you can't get in certain types of housing. If you don't have any credit, if you don't have references, if you've been gone for 7, 10, 20 years, how do you show, your past rental history? And then you have to deal with something that I would call slumlords, which are people who will rent to anybody, and they're just out for the buck. They just care about money. You may have to live in an apartment that's not, really well put together, things like that. Just having to deal with those type of situations. One thing I can say about additional barriers and risks is just that you have to, really feel confident in who you are to be able to do things out here, to be able to just walk in confidence and just feel comfortable. What helped me with the transition back is, like I said, the support. I've always had family support, and, in everyone's eyes, your family's supposed to be there, but to know someone outside of my family truly cared about my well-being, truly cared about what I was doing, how I was going to get it done, and if I became successful or made it in anything that I was doing. That was very important to me.
Thank you, Antoinette. And Brenda, what do you think helps with the transition back and creates what creates additional barriers for survivors and creates risks for survivors?
I think one thing is that I think what that was helpful for me was that I would dream and think and create and think about what my life will be like and what I wanted for me. And, it's funny, sometimes it almost would become a fairy tale, and everything was going to be so much better than it was being in prison. And unfortunately, it ended quickly when I was released, when I was faced with bills and medical care and people's attitudes toward me for being away so long. An example was when I went to the DMV to take my driver's test again, because the DMV had dumped me, and I was in this truck with the instructor, and he said to me, "So, Miss Brenda, why haven't you been driving for 26 years?" And I said, "I was in prison," and you always know what the next question's going to be. And he said, "For what?" And I said, "Well, I had to protect my life, and my abuser died." And he immediately said, "Return." And I was afraid he was going to fail me, and that I wasn't prepared for that kind of a response, and I didn't know what to do with that. One of the things that I think that isn't as helpful are programs that are very strict about what they allow women to have and not have. For example, only 3 pairs of underwear, and it doesn't allow women to be treated with any form of autonomy, and it continues to control them. And so what happens is it brings up all their past experiences and situations and relationships, and so even when they were incarcerated, so it feels the same. What's so important is being able to have some kind of specialized counseling about deviant trauma. It's so critical to address a lot of the issues and the layers that have been compounded over the years and the barriers that are faced. Another thing that is so huge, as was for me being a mother, reunifying with my son, who was now an adult, and watching and trying to understand, because we're still getting to know each other, and it's been 5 years, about decisions that I made while being incarcerated, about what was best for him and being able to let him go, and about him feeling abandoned and, that he wasn't important enough for me to be in his life, and the guilt that's come up for me being away. These are all things that are so huge, and it's been difficult for me to understand that, I thought just being able to say, hey, you know what, I thought I did what was best, and I gave you up for adoption, and now that you're back in my life and want answers to these things, I'm going, because I don't have all the answers. All I can say was I did the best I knew how given my situation, and I hope you can understand that. It doesn't mean that I ever stopped loving you and don't today, but that we can move forward from here. And now I have 2 wonderful grandchildren in my life with my adult son. My son was 3 when I left him, and he is way a man now, and I'm a grandmother, and just trying to navigate through all this stuff and know that there are groups and organizations, and can be groups and organizations, that are more needed to help support these types of reunifications of family, because it's so important that if family members are still out there, because family becomes indifferent after being away for so long. A lot of families disown their loved ones because they're tired of waiting. They close those doors, and it's so important that there's a method or an avenue that those doors can be reopened, and that somebody's there kind of mediating in between to help heal some of that brokenness.
Well, thank you, Brenda. Really, thank you, all 3 of you, Brenda, Mary Antoinette, for this profoundly and wonderfully rich conversation. And I know that Sue has been collecting questions from the public chat, so I want to turn it over to Sue to be able to address some of those questions from the audience. Sue?
Thank you, Katina, and thank you, Brenda, Antoinette, and Mary. Wow, as Katina said, that was really powerful. And I know you have so much more to share, and we have more questions than we have time for. So I also understand that you want about 5 minutes at the end. So we really only have about 5 minutes for questions. Quickly, Mary, what was the website you mentioned earlier about Center Care? And Emily, if you could type it into the chat, that would be great, please.
This is the Center for Comprehensive Care at St. Luke Roosevelt Hospital in New York. The program is called Coming Home. It's in the Morningside Clinic. The director's contact information is Mary Johnson, MSW, at phone number 212-523-6941. There's also a website, www.centerforcare.org.
You got that, Emily? Okay, I think. Could you say it one more time, Mary, please?
Yes, www.centerforcare.org.
Center for
Mary Johnson's number is 212-523-6941. And this was actually created from Kathy Bodine, who was working with AIDS patients and ran AIDS programming while she was incarcerated herself in New York.
Thank you, Mary. Goodness. It sounds like we should have you guys back. I know I say that at every webinar, but it's true. Because some of the questions focus about the similarities and differences between people who are convicted of crimes who ended up not serving time, so are like on probation or parole for extended periods of time, and how similar and different you think their experiences may be.
This is Brenda. I think one thing is unfortunately a lot of times when someone's either on probation or parole, a lot of times that can be used against the person, family members in order to control them, or someone that they're in a relationship. I'll call, your parole officer, or I'll contact that probation officer. It's really difficult to navigate that process on your own without having somebody holding that over your head. I think there are a lot of things now. They have them, most probation and parole offices have them now attend classes. As soon as they're released, there are certain classes that they are required to attend. And I think it's really important that when practitioners and advocates work with inmates that are returning, that they understand that navigation process, because it isn't just something as simple as the gates opened and they're out.
Yeah. And so a couple of the other questions. One was about reentry coalitions. And Teresa, you asked that, and that is one of the things that we do want to do a webinar on. We've been in touch with some different models, particularly focusing on those that include domestic violence organizations, anti-domestic violence organizations in them. So we do want to come back to that. Another issue that we do also want to talk about is what happens when there is domestic violence going on within the institution, and what can and should outside advocates do. So there were some questions about that. So it is something on our radar that we also want to come back to. And then there was another question about that I think Brenda touched on, the issue of so many of the community-based anti-domestic violence programs focus on an immediate crisis. And Brenda, you talked about the fact, and so did you, Antoinette, that so many incarcerated women have, frankly, for some of them, the first time to have the opportunity to really look at their own past experiences and to understand some of those realities. And when they get out, are seeking additional support and or may end up in another relationship where some of those dynamics are happening. And the issue about, well, what about these programs that are like, well, you were in prison and you don't have a current situation, a current crisis. That's just that's like a whole other set of webinars. Dasheen, we really want to come back to that. I think yep.
Sue, can I say something?
Absolutely.
This is Antoinette. I want to say that I'm working with the KDVA, and they're partnered with the Center for Women and Families, and we have a second chance reentry mentoring project that we're doing at the jails here in Louisville, Kentucky. They have one in Lexington, Kentucky, and one in Shelbyville, Kentucky. And I'm a facilitator for a class that I call Transitions. And what we do is we have a lesson plan that we go over with them called Seeking Safety, and I do lessons out of that each week. And we actually look for ladies, participants, to be in a second chance mentoring project. And what that is we connect them with a mentor or a coach. I'll call them a coach, with a coach that is from the community that wants to pair up with them. And what they do is, while the ladies are still incarcerated, they built up a relationship with them. And once they're released, they're a support system for them when they're released. They can call on them and talk to them when they're having a bad day, if they think they may go back and use substances or things like that.
And Antoinette talked about that program on our webinar number 3, and so that is actually up on our website if you missed it and you want to go back and hear more about that program. But in the interest of time, I want to turn it back over to our wonderful presenters so they can have some time for closing remarks. And apologies to those of you the questions we weren't able to get to today.
So, Mary, and I just want everybody to know in the audience that your contact information, Brenda, Mary, and Antoinette, are on the screen right now. But Mary, would you like to share any final thoughts?
Yes. When I was getting ready to come home, and I had been locked up for so long, the thought occurred to me that I should talk to some women that had been in and out and see what I was about to experience and do more than just survive, really try to figure out, okay, now what? So a friend of mine that had been back and forth in and out, that was a short-timer, but had been back and forth in and out for most of her life, sat down with me one day, and I said, what am I about to experience? And she thought carefully, and she said, well, you've always worked, so you'll do really well in a work environment because that's how you've done your time, that's how you survive, that's who you are. But you'll have difficulty with social relationships, and you'll be in a room with family or friends, and they'll be talking about their kitchens and their husbands and their cars and their children and their jobs and their gardens, and those are experiences that you haven't had because you've been gone for so long. So socially it will be uncomfortable and difficult, probably for a long time. And she offered tips like when you walk into a house, it'll seem very small because you've been in long corridors with dark gray walls and lots of echoes. And other little tips like how difficult it might be to learn how to drive again, certainly to use technology. So a lot of the tips that I've learned coming home turned out to be exactly true. But I think the social hardship part of it is really the most difficult at this point. Even though my life is rich and full and I've been able to recover as much as possible, there's all those years that I'm just not going to get back. And so I'm still somewhat of an outcast, as many of us are that have been incarcerated. No matter what we do and no matter how hard we try, we're still second-class citizens. We're still expected to stay in our place. All of our business is expected to be everybody else's business because, after all, we're incarcerated and convicted people, so that they're perfectly within their rights to run background checks on us and criminal checks and check the box and demand that we check the box on an employment application. I've been turned down 2 or 3 times this week for employment, and I'm convinced it's because I had to check the box, which was right above my signature, that said, have you ever been convicted of a crime? Yes. So I'm thrilled to be here. I'm very happy to be able to share with everyone what I've experienced. I have tried my best to make my life complete, as complete as it can be at this point. I'm honored to share what I know, but my heart still bleeds for those that are inside that will not have this opportunity.
Thank you, Mary. Brenda, do you have any final thoughts? Brenda?
Oh, yes, I'm sorry. Yes, I do. First of all, it's been an honor and a pleasure to be part of this wonderful webinar today. And I just, in retrospect, I just want and hope that each practitioner and advocate that has participated in this today will be able to have been able to gain a greater understanding of the types of people that are coming back into our communities and why it is so vitally important and critical that they have open doors for them, that they not be judged and it not be just a situation where they're controlled and told what they're supposed to do and how they're supposed to do it, but allow them to spread their wings and allow them to move forward. I am eternally grateful to have had the people that I've had in the programs that have supported me, and I am looking forward to continue this work, and I'm hoping that each one of us will all be able to move forward and work together again in the future.
Great. Antoinette, do you have any final words?
Yes. The first thing I'd like to say is for any advocates or anyone who's working with the formerly incarcerated, that the smallest things matter to us. I know while incarcerated, when I had people come in for domestic violence and teach class, I always liked the colors that they wore. A lady came in with a bright pink shirt on, and I thought, that put a smile on my face, and it's something that you wouldn't even think of. You get up and you're putting on clothes, and we wore brown outfits the entire time I was incarcerated, and that was the only colors that I was allowed to have was brown and white. So just seeing that and just knowing that the people who were teaching me or trying to help me, that they were human. When they shared personal experiences, even if it was something not so detailed, but just showing me that they were human and that they treated me as an equal and not lesser than meant a lot to me. I just want to tell everybody to keep up the good work, and this is my passion. This is my passion.
Antoinette. Sue, I'll pass it back to you for anything final.
I just want to say thank you to you, Katita, for organizing this, and to our presenters for sharing such powerful information. Thank you so much. And thank you all for joining us. Katita?
Yes. Yes, and I want to also, again, thank everybody for Brenda, Mary, Antoinette for sharing your stories, for being willing to talk and share about your powerful and incredible stories and your advocacy that you do, and for the people listening and for your questions and interests as well.
Have a great afternoon. Thank you.
All righty, bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye.